Okay, let's pray. Dear Father, we just give you the praise and glory. We thank you for being with us tonight. Where two or more gathered, you will be with us. And even though we're separated with time and space, we still can gather. So we appreciate that. Just be with us tonight. Guide us in your word and what we need to hear individually and collectively. Forgive us where we fail you. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All righty. So let me share my PowerPoint. Now I used to see it.
Yep.
All right. So this is a map of basically Europe and Africa, and this is a depiction of Joni's DNA. So my question is, does Joni DNA prove that the Bible is true? Any thoughts on that?
So Yvonne, can you see where it's? I went into ancestry.com, and this
Yes.
is the dot, and so you can see if you add Northern Italy and Southern Italy, I'm 71% Italian, and then I'm a little Greece and Albania, a little Middle East.
So what's interesting, in 2019, Joni did the DNA test on ancestry.com. And at that time, she was 94% Italian and 6% Greece. Of course, she's always claimed to be 100% Italian, and that all her grandparents came from Italy, so she had to be 100%. But obviously, that was wrong. So in the last...
Well, no, wait a minute. All four of my grandparents were born in Italy.
Yeah, but you're not 100% Italian.
But they must have married, maybe somebody from Greece and maybe somebody from Albania. I don't know.
Or the internet could be wrong.
Or the internet could be wrong.
But Joni being 100% Italian is obviously wrong.
Right.
So she went back in, and since that time, Ancestry has updated her numbers. So her numbers have changed. So what's going on?
Everybody's
I don't know.
Okay. Basically, what's going on is Ancestry has collected more and more data to compare against. And so they can change the numbers because what Joni's DNA has been matched up against is other DNA results. And so now by comparing the numbers, the results are different.
So now she's only 61% Italian?
Well, she's 61% Southern Italy and 10%.
Oh, I see. Northern Italy. Yeah, 10%.
Down to 71% Italian.
Wow.
So
where's it gone?
Her Greece has grown from 6% to 27% when you count Albania.
Where's Albania?
Just next to Greece, south and next to Greece. You see that little green thing there?
Yeah.
The real little one?
That little green
one?
thing, that's Albania.
That's Albania. And then we added 2% of the Middle East. So she is also a Middle Easterner.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So because of that, because she's connected to the Middle East, we now know and can prove she's the descendant of Noah.
Oh, yeah.
Which we talked about in our first meeting together.
Right.
All right, so let's look at the next slide, which we covered in our first meeting. So you see the Middle East includes all of the territory that's in yellow, which is where the descendants of Shem settled after the Tower of Babel. The Hamites settled in northern Africa, and the Japhites settled in the north of the Middle East and westward. So you see Italy and Greece involved in that area. So to me, this is proof to me that in the Tower of Babel, the Middle Easterners, the descendants of Noah, basically, were scattered. And Joni's a result of that. And we now see that she is tied to the Middle East in her DNA. And my belief is as they collect more and more data in Ancestry.com, they'll see more and more evidence that people came from the Middle East.
Oh,
Does that make sense?
very interesting.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me. Okay, so let's go into our study. We've been talking about the life of Jacob. So far, Jacob has deceived both Isaac and Esau to obtain Isaac's blessings. Esau threatened to kill him after Esau or Isaac had blessed Jacob. So Rebekah asked Isaac to protect Jacob. So to do that, Isaac asked Jacob to get a wife and go to Haran among his own people and get a wife from there. On the way, he stopped on the first night at Bethel, and there's where he had a dream where angels were ascending and descending up the ladder. And he had a vision where God talked to him and made a promise that he would protect him on his trip, that he would bless him, he would curse those who curse him and bless those that blessed him. So those were promises that God made to Jacob on his way to get his bride. He met Rachel at a well, fell in love with basically Rachel. And Rachel was the daughter of his uncle Laban, and that's exactly where Isaac had asked Jacob to go. So he works for 7 years. I didn't intend to jump. He works for 7 years to receive Rachel's hand. He was tricked by Laban into marrying Leah. So he worked another 7 years for Rachel's hand. And he did take possession of marriage that same night that he married, or the next day actually, that he married Leah. So he now had 2 wives. Those 2 wives were given handmaids, servants basically. So he had 2 other women involved in this, and each of his wives gave him the handmaids for wives. So he now has 4 wives, and during these 14 years, he accumulated 11 children, or 11 sons, I should say. 6 by Leah, 2 by each of the concubines or the servants. So that's a total of 4 more. And then Rachel also had a son. So that's basically where we stand. And so we're going to go to the next slide. And Johnny, if you read this, this is continuation of our story with Jacob.
Genesis 30.
After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me on my way so I can go back to my own homeland. Give me my wives and children for whom I have served you, and I will be on my way. You know how much work I've done for you." But Laban said to him, "If I have found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you."
Okay. So basically, Joseph wants to leave. Laban says, "I don't want you to go." So they're going to be in discussion here of what kind of deal they can make, basically. So this is after Rachel gave birth to Joseph. Joseph we'll see later on in Genesis as another figurehead, and we'll spend time hopefully next year talking about Joseph. And why doesn't Jacob just leave on his own initiative and instead of dealing with Laban? He wants to leave. Any ideas?
Doesn't want to leave empty-handed. I mean,
Well, he has two wives, but he doesn't really have any property. So
Right.
that's certainly an issue. But if he gets back home, he's got Isaac still there and obviously can take care of himself. And he's going to inherit that property at some point in time. That could be one of the reasons. The primary reason is that the culture of the day is that the leader of the tribe or the clan, which would be Laban, really holds all the honor. In other words, you've got to honor that agreement until Laban releases you from it. And even though they've agreed to 7 years for each of the different wives, Jacob is still honored at least to discuss the situation with him. So it says that Laban says to him, if you have found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed you because of me. So they blessed me because of you. I misread that. But what is divination? Does he really believe in the Lord?
Doesn't trust him if he does believe.
Yeah. Divination is really a pagan spiritual type belief. You believe in idols, you believe in other spirits, etc. So he's not really a believer. And so that's a key issue here.
Well, my Bible says, for I have learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me for your sake.
Okay.
So they didn't use the word divination, they used
And
experience.
your Bible is which one?
New King James.
New King James. Okay. So the Hebrew word here is nashkash, which is really the word for satanic sorcery or incantations. So to me, divination probably is closer to it. So Laban is really a pagan who's turned to the occult for his spiritual revealings here. All right, Johnny, verses 28 through 30.
He added, name your wages and I will pay them. Jacob said to him, you know how I have worked for you and how your livestock has fared under my care. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. But now when may I do something for my own household?
Okay. So we got really two things going on here. Number one, Laban is basically saying, name your wages and I will pay them. What's he really saying there? I'll give you anything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he really wants him to stay.
Yep. So Jacob is saying basically, you know this isn't a good deal, and I'm just paraphrasing. So what else did Laban say? Oh, I'm sorry, did Jacob say?
He'd worked for him.
Yeah, I worked for you for what, 14 years now, right? And the Lord has blessed you, blessed Laban basically, through my efforts, is what he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
And here he's kind of giving praise to God. He's recognizing that God's been involved in this, even though he's done a lot of the hard, toil, and work. Right? So that's a good thing. So it's at least some evidence that Jacob is beginning to learn from his experiences. But in verse 30 it says, but now when may I do something for my own household? So he's kind of going into a negotiation phase here. He's not interested in wages, obviously. So he's interested in something else. So because of what he said, Laban tries another tactic. We see this in verse 31 and 32.
What shall I give you? He asked. Don't give me anything, Jacob replied. But if you will do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them. Let me go through all your flocks today and remove from them every speckled and spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, and every spotted and speckled goat. They will be my wages.
Okay, so Laban is again saying, "What shall I give you?" He's demonstrating he's desperate here. He's willing to try anything. So, and here in Laban's offer, Jacob makes a counter proposal, and he says, "Don't give me anything." But Jacob is basically saying, "I'm willing to stay, but I want to get something out of it." And so he's going to continue to keep Laban's flocks if he'll give him the opportunity to build a herd. Which animals is Jacob willing to take as his own?
Those that aren't purebred.
Yeah. If you look at sheep, typically most sheep are white. If you look at goats, most goats are black, right? So he's saying, if you give me the speckled or spotted sheep and the dark colored lambs, I guess lambs are white also, right? He's also got goats involved, I think, in here also. Speckled goats, spotted or speckled goats. So, as we said, typically goats are typically brown. So Jacob's basically asking to take a minimal number of animals and to build a herd from those. And he'll also tend Laban's stock as well. All right. And then he ends by basically saying in verse 32, "Let me go through our flocks today." So he wants to go and select out of the flocks there the ones that are the oddballs, basically, right? Which would be a small number.
Less desirable.
Less desirable. Okay. All right, Johnny, 33 through 34.
And my honesty will testify for me in the future. Whenever you check on the wages you have paid me, any goat in my possession that is not speckled or spotted, or any lamb that is not dark colored, will be considered stolen. Agreed, said Laban. Let it be as you have said.
Okay. So notice the time frame. There's no time frame on this. Jacob is agreeing to work under these conditions, at least indefinitely, as far as the agreement is concerned. And both parties are basically assuming they're getting a better part of the deal. Jacob thinks he's making a good deal, and Laban says, "Hey, sounds like a good deal to me." And Jacob is assuming it's not going to last very long because he wants to leave. And Laban's saying, "I think he's going to be here a long time." Okay. But Laban still has some tricks up his sleeve. He's just as big a deceiver as Jacob is. All right. So 35 through 36, Johnny.
That same day he removed all the male goats that were streaked or spotted, and all the speckled or spotted female goats, all that had white on them, and all the dark colored lambs, and he placed them in the care of his sons. Then he put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob continued to tend the rest of Laban's flocks.
So that same day, this was a day that Jacob was going to go collect his flocks to start his business with. So it says that same day, who's he? Important to know the pronouns.
Jacob.
That
No.
same day, Laban removed all the male goats. How do we know that? Go back to the prior verses. Agreed, said Laban. Let it be as you have said. Who was the last person talking? Laban.
So sometimes it's hard to follow or keep
Yeah.
up, but yes.
That's why I always try to get you to look at who the pronouns are. You need to make sure, because you guys thought it was Jacob, and it's really Laban. All right. So in verse 35, we're told that Laban pulls a fast one on Jacob. So he's basically going against the bargain that was struck because Jacob was fully expecting to free his livestock there. So he went in and pulled all the flocks that were to go to Jacob, gave them to his other sons, and sent them a 3 days journey away and asked him to tend the flocks. So he's basically taking them away from Jacob. So he's trying to make it as humanly impossible as he can for Jacob to be successful.
So did Jacob know he took those?
Well, he did pretty quickly.
See, I read this ahead of time, and I'm like, the whole
Yeah.
time I was thinking it was Jacob.
I know, hard to understand. So do you feel that Laban infringed on the agreement?
Yeah.
I do. Yeah. But Jacob had a few tricks of his own. 37 through 39.
Jacob, however, took fresh cut branches from popular almond and plane trees and made white strips on them by peeling the bark and exposing the white inner wood of the branches. Then he placed the peeled branches in all the watering troughs so that they would be directly in front of the flocks when they came to drink. When the flocks were in heat and came to drink, they made it in front of the branches, and they bore young that were streaked or speckled or spotted.
So I couldn't understand that part. Do they usually mate in the woods or something? I didn't understand what the wood was that they stuck in the troughs.
Well, what Jacob is trying to do here is control the mating. So, and we'll see in the later verses kind of how he does that. So we're going to have to work into it. But basically, we have two deceivers working here, two trick artists, Laban and Jacob, trying to out trick each other. So Jacob is caring for Laban's flocks, which were really only white lambs and solid colored goats. And he begins employing careful techniques for selective mating. That's what he's trying to do. So he's taking fresh branches of poplar, almond, and plane trees. He peels back the branches and he puts them in the water. Is this a trick of some type? Some baiting technique that he knows about?
That's big.
I guess so. It's weird.
Could be. In reality, it's only he's flavoring the water, which entices them to come to drink. And when they drink, then he goes about his other mating practices. So it's really just an enticer to come and drink. So he's controlling their actions. So it kind of sounds like a magic, but it's really not, is it? All right, let's look at the rest of it, verses 40 through 42.
Jacob set apart the young of the flock by themselves, but made the rest face the streaked and dark-colored animals that belonged to Laban. Thus he made separate flocks for himself and did not put them with Laban's animals. Whenever the stronger females were in heat, Jacob would place the branches in the troughs in front of the animals so that they would mate near the branches. But if the animals were weak, he would not place them there. So the weak animals went to Laban and the strong ones to Jacob.
All right. So what's Jacob trying to accomplish?
He's trying to get a strong flock together.
And he's also trying to determine who mates with whom, right? So he separated out the young ones, or those that probably were not in the mating season. He's only using the stronger females for breeding. Okay? He's only allowing the streaked and dark colored animals to breed. In other words, he's controlling which animals are breeding, and as far as the males are concerned, which males are breeding and which males are not. Okay. And he's taking the feeble out of them and not letting them breed. Okay. And he's giving the feeble ones to Laban. He's keeping the stronger ones. So over time, Jacob builds a flock of speckled, striped, and black animals that were very strong and healthy. Okay? And he's given the wheat and the solid colors to Laban. All right? So there's a lot of superstition about from commentaries about how this is all done, but basically he's just using animal husbandry to determine how the animals are made, and that's done today. Mating of dogs and horses and a lot of other things. So it's a fairly common technique. So he's simply using genetics to perform selective breeding and really nothing more. And, we know about DNA today. Talked about that earlier, but even DNA is used today to determine how to make stronger herds and so forth. All right. So again, which are the dominant traits? White for sheep and brown for goats. And he's basically using the branches of the trees to bring the females to the water, and then he's selecting which males are to breed with them. And by that, he's developing his technique. All right. Verse 43.
In this way, the man grew exceedingly prosperous and came to his own large flocks and female and male servants and camels and donkeys.
So not only is he got a big flock, what are they?
Flocks?
Flock of sheep and goats and so forth. He's become wealthy through the process. He's got servants now, male servants. He's got camels. He's got donkeys. He's doing pretty well, apparently in a short period of time. So we got really two striking outcomes. Growth itself. He's altered the nature of the two flocks. Laban's flocks has basically quickly turned weak and unproductive. And through this process, Jacob has become exceedingly prosperous. And I think that's the end of that chapter, right?
Yeah.
Question.
Yep.
Laban went back 3-day journey away from Jacob, but they're still in the same area.
He sent his son 3 days away. His sons. They are in the northern part of that area we looked at on the map. So it'd be north of current day Israel, a little bit east, and they're actually north of Euphrates River, and so he's quite a ways away, and so there's a lot of area that they could expand. All right, so let me get out of this guy. And we'll go to the next set of slides. Good time to stop. Okay, now we're back in chapter 31. We're into chapter 31, I should say. So we continue the story of Jacob, and we basically the entire story of the book of Genesis is fundamentally a story of God working in and through the lives of flawed men. We saw that through Noah. We saw it through Abraham, Adam and Eve, even Adam basically, and now we're seeing it through Jacob. So he's obviously standing at the head of the class. And if you remember, God has promised that he would be with Jacob, that he'd bless him, and so forth. And we don't really we see the fruits of the blessings, but we don't see Jacob growing a lot through the process. And each of the decisions that he has made, whether it be decisions about his wife, the decisions about how he works and what he gets, it's really, he's tugging with God as far as who has control. Does Jacob have control or does God have control? We're going to continue to see this throughout the next couple of chapters or so. So here's my disclaimer, which everybody has memorized by heart. All right. So verses 1 and 2, Johnny.
Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying, Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all this wealth from what belonged to our father. And Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude toward him was not what it had been.
Okay. So this agreement that Laban and Jacob made has allowed Jacob to build his own estates. And now he's finding out that his sons, Laban's sons actually, are starting to talk about this large estate that Jacob is building, and the fact that their estate has been declining. So there's concerns about that. So Jacob gets word of this. This is what he says Jacob heard. So what is the world's modes of friendship?
The what?
The world's mode of friendship. How do you make friendships?
Say hi,
From a worldly sense.
or being nice to each other.
Yeah, but the world today is mostly trying to take advantage of everybody else, right? Especially if you look at what's going on now. So you're friendly towards those that give you something, typically. And if you can't get anything out of the relationship, you may just move on, right? So a lot of people are looking for money. They're looking for power. They're looking for fame. They're looking for compliments, sex, whatever. And this is basically a conditional love, right? If you give me something, I'll help you out. But God's world of love is different to that, right? What's His love like?
Unconditional.
Unconditional. It's entirely different. It's called agape love. So that's what God is seeking. Unconditional love. He doesn't like conditions on it, and He wants to give and not to worry about receiving. And there's verses in Luke that really describe this type of love. So let's read that, John.
If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be the children of the Most High, because He is kind to the ungrateful and wicked.
So really, Jacob is about the point where he's starting to realize this concept that God's trying to give him. God's been blessing him, been blessing his actions, but he hasn't been recognizing that. So we're about to get to that point. So verse 3, Johnny.
Then the Lord said to Jacob, go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you.
Okay. So this is the first time that Jacob has heard from God in 20 years since he left his own land in Canaan, since he was separated from Isaac. So now the Lord is trying to direct Jacob to leave Haran, which is where he's been, and return it to his own land. And those years have served a purpose in Jacob's life. God's been trying to teach him some things. He's been trying to direct him, but Jacob's been fighting all the way. So verses 4 through 5.
So Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah to come out to the fields where his flocks were. He said to them, I see that your father's attitude towards me is not what it was before, but the God of my father has been with me.
Okay. So the daughters have been with Jacob now for basically 20 years. 14 years that he worked for him, the 6 years that he's now been working to accumulate his property. So they would naturally assume that their life's going to continue as it has been. And Laban is certainly open to this as well. But God has another idea. He's ready for Jacob to go back to his homeland. So Jacob is now making a strong case to his wives, Rachel and Leah. He didn't discuss it with the two servants, obviously, and asked them to follow him. They have a legal obligation to do this. They're married to him. So they really don't have any obligation to the father. So why do you feel he has any need to convince them at all? I'm not looking for a specific answer. Just want your thoughts on it.
I don't know, keep them happy.
Keep them happy. Okay. Yvonne, this would be a good time for you to speak up. Any thoughts?
No, I really didn't quite catch the question.
Okay, sorry. The question is, why does Jacob feel an obligation to convince his wives to leave and go with him?
Well, why would he want to go without them?
Well, he's going to take them with him. I'm just asking. He's trying to convince them to go, so there's got to be a reason for it.
They've never left their dad before, father.
Yeah. He's never left the father. They've been living there their entire lives. They're being asked to go to a foreign country. So those are key things. He has a large family now. Got 4 wives and 11 sons. And we don't know how many daughters, but probably got some daughters. But the problem he's got, he has provided almost no leadership to the family. We saw as he was having kids, his sons, the wives always took the initiative to name the children. We haven't seen any activity, at least so far, of him being involved with his sons. So leadership's not there. He's out tending the flocks, and that's about all he's been doing. But he's built a large estate, got servants. Maybe now he's trying to show some leadership. He's probably thinking maybe it's time. We don't really know. I'm just trying to get some thoughts. All right, Johnny, 6 through 8.
You know that I've worked for your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. However, God has not allowed him to harm me. If he said, the speckled ones will be your wages, then all the flocks gave birth to speckled young. And if he said, the streaked ones will be your wages, then all the flocks bore streaked young.
Okay. So we're saying here that Laban is really not Jacob's ally anymore. You can see he's changed the plan that Jacob came up with 10 times. So every time the spotted lambs started producing, he said, well, you got to take a different kind of lamb. You know? So he's done this several different times, 10 times actually. That's why I said a different process. So that made it very difficult for Jacob to do this, right? So he's continuing to fight Jacob the whole way. All right, let's move on here. Verse 9.
So God has taken away your father's livestock and has given them to me.
So here's basically what he's saying to the wives. Your father did everything that he could to harm me, but God has taken away your father's livestock and given them to me. It wasn't me doing it. So you see a recognition here that he's saying, I couldn't have done this all by myself. God had to be involved.
He's finally starting to see what God working.
So God's working in his life. And he's now knows that the real secret to his success has been God. Because with all the changes that Laban had made, there's no way to keep up with it. So why does God choose to bless Jacob at Laban's expense? In the past, most of the benefits have been going to Laban. Now they're starting to go to Jacob. Why is that happening? The promise he made. And the promise was, I will bless those that bless you, and I will curse those that curse you. So when Laban was being blessed, and Jacob was being blessed, God was blessing Laban. But when Laban started cursing Jacob, God started cursing Laban. So this was a promise of God. And Jacob is now realizing, hey, God's doing exactly what he said he would do. That make sense?
Was Laban unable to tend his own flock and such? Why?
Well, he was a patriarch.
Sure.
He was obviously more advanced in age. Because you remember that Isaac married Rebecca, and Rebecca was his sister. And now Rachel is his son. So I don't know how many years ago, but we know that Isaac was 40 years of age when he married Rebecca. It was a number of years later after he married after Jacob went to get his estate. We don't know yet how old he is, but he's an elderly man. So he's probably relying on his sons. We know Rebecca was also, Rachel was also very cheap as well. So that's what patriarchs do. So let's see what the wives do next. We got some more.
In breeding season, I once had a dream in which I looked up and saw that the male goats mating with the flock were streaked, speckled, or spotted. The angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob, I answered, here I am.
Okay. So here Jacob is relating an encounter he has with the angels of God. And this is a dream about male goats. What kind of male goats did he see? Streaked, speckled, or spotted.
Spotted.
So everywhere that Jacob goes, or everywhere he looks actually, he saw striped, speckled, and spotted male goats. And remember that he's caring both for Laban's flocks and his own. So this is a dream that an angel of God's given. Basically tells him about his success. And he's relaying that to his wives. 12 through 13.
And he said, look up and see that all the male goats mating with the flock are streaked, speckled, or spotted. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land.
Okay. So the angel is now telling him what this all means. I've noticed what's been happening. And he's basically saying, I'm going to take care of it. And he gives him a reference back to when Jacob met with God back in Bethel. Bethel was the place where he was on his journey into Haran. He stopped in Bethel. He he laid on the ground with a stone beside him. Talks about a pillar, but it was a stone. And when we talked about that, we talked about it actually being for protection. But that's when we had the angels descending and ascending up and down the ladder, Jacob's ladder, and where God talked to him and made the promises. This is the event that the angels talked about. So the question you got to ask is, did Jacob's efforts in interbreeding lead to his success, or was it God's grace to bring Jacob's success? Obviously, the answer is yes. It's really both, because Jacob had to work obviously. But Jacob's work led to the outcome, but God's work made it possible. So Jacob's basically trying to convince his family, his wives, that he has announced that the Lord has talked to him. The Lord has asked him to leave and go back to his own country, and he's pleading with them to take up stakes and move to an unknown future and living in his own country. All right. So, do you remember exactly what the vow was that God made to Jacob? Be with him, protect him,
Take care of him.
take care of him, and bring him back to his own country. And what did Jacob make in return? Made a vow as well. God, huh?
Yvonne?
I want to. Yvonne, it's your time.
Nobody here knows the answer.
Okay.
I should look at Delton's notes.
Now, there you go. All right, read this. Genesis 28, 20 through 22. This is about Jacob.
Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God. And this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give you a tenth.
Okay? So it's basically repeating what the vow that God had made and saying, if you will watch over me, if you will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, and I return safely to my father's household, then you will be my God. And this stone, this pillar that he's, which is what he dedicated at Bethel before he left, and that he will give a tenth back to God, whatever his possessions are.
But he's
Interesting.
bargaining with God.
Yeah, he did. Well, what does he know? He's just a man, right? All right, Johnny, 12 through 13.
And he said, look up and see that all the male goats mating with the flock. We just read this.
We did? Oh, we're back. I'm going back to the same verse. I'm sorry. You read it again.
Read it again. And he said, look up and see that all the male goats mating with the flock are streaked, speckled, or spotted, for I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land.
Okay, so Jacob's made his case to his wives. God has appeared to Jacob and told him, give him instructions to basically pack up and leave and go back to his own land. Jacob needed to bring his wives along with him, so he's asking them to come along. So let's see how they respond.
Then Rachel and Leah replied, do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what was paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and our children. So do whatever God has told you.
So the wives are kind of focusing on their inheritance. In reality, do they naturally receive an inheritance?
No.
No. Inheritance typically in that culture in those days, the estate was divided amongst the sons. And the eldest son got twice as much as the other sons got as well. And so the deal was the daughters are basically given in marriage to another man. The father selects who that person is. The father expects a dowry back, etc. So they're not going to get anything anyway, but for some reason they're focusing on that. But what this says is that basically our father's estate has gone to nothing anyway. So what value is it to us? He's also saying that they have been treated as foreigners, which is typical response for the wives. They've been there's been a price that's paid for them, but that money goes to the father, so there's no benefit to them. So are they expressing any reason to stay? No.
No.
So they basically tell Jacob to do as God has directed. All right. Let's push on. 17 through 18.
Then Jacob put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove all his livestock ahead of him, along with all the goods he accumulated in Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan.
Okay. So basically his aim is to do a midnight escape. We'll actually find out in later verses, actually the next set of verses, that Laban is away at this time anyway, so he didn't have to leave at midnight. But what's a proper thing for Jacob to do?
Speak to Laban and tell him what his plans are.
Yeah, exactly. And he's not doing that. All right. And he knows that Laban doesn't want him to leave, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and with their condition, he has a legal obligation to stay because he had an unending contract with Laban. He didn't have a time frame. So he's wrong in just backing up and leaving, obviously. 19 through 21.
When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household gods. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him he was running away. So he fled with all he had, crossed the Euphrates River, and headed for the hill country of Gilead.
Okay. So Rachel makes her own move. She steals her father's household gods. He's a pagan. He believes in satanic worship and witchcraft or whatever. So he has some idols. He's out shearing his sheep. So it provides her an opportunity to do this. And typically for pagan believers, their idols and so forth are placed in a prominent position in the household. And so he's going to notice that they're gone.
Would there be any value to them, like a precious metal as well?
Yeah. What was Rachel's intention? Could it be worth something? I don't know whether it's made of gold or whatever, or maybe she just wants to worship him. Maybe she's pagan herself. Right? All right. So Jacob and his family are heading south. They cross over the Euphrates River, which is a major river in that area, and they're going to Gilead. Where's Gilead?
In the mountains.
It's on the other side of the river. Which river? Jordan River.
Oh.
On the other side of the Jordan River from Canaan. All right. So it's east of the Jordan River. All right. So verses 22 through 23, we find out that Laban pursues Jacob.
On the third day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. Taking his relatives with him, he pursued Jacob for 7 days and caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead.
Okay. So remember that his sons are 3 days away. So we see on the third day, he's told about Laban. So apparently a servant of the household goes to Laban and says, hey, your Jacob has left. He's taken your all the goods and headed south. So as soon as he finds out, he rushes to catch up with Jacob, and it takes him how long? 7 days. So, so they're directly east of Bethel, across from the Jordan and Gilead. So we have no commentary from Moses as to the motivation that Laban has for hastily going after him. Probably knowing Laban, he probably intends to kill Jacob, kill his daughters, and bring them all back and get all his goods back, right? But we don't really know. But certainly he would like no better excuse than to get his herd back.
Well, my Bible says that Laban intended to harm Jacob, probably because he believed Jacob had stolen his household gods. But the God of Jacob's father kept the promise of protection made 20 years earlier.
All right. That makes a lot of sense.
And warned Laban in a dream not to harm Jacob.
We're not there yet.
Oh.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just reading what it says.
That's 24.
Yeah.
So you can read this, Johnny, verses 24 through 25.
Then God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream at night and said to him, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country of Gilead when Laban overtook him, and Laban and his relatives camped there too.
Okay. So Laban reaches Jacob, and when he gets there, he has a dream, warning him, where God's given him a warning. This is the first time we've seen God appear to Laban, and the second time in Scripture so far that we see God speaking to an unbeliever. So does anybody remember the first time he spoke to an unbeliever in the book of Genesis?
See?
Well, Satan, I'll give you that one.
So there was two?
Satan, no, well, Satan is really not an unbeliever, is he? He knows God.
Well,
Right, and I
So-
hesitated to say it, but
That's what I was.
He's not a follower of God,
right.
but he certainly believes that God exists. He's not a pagan God. You could argue maybe Cain, whatever you want. But the other appearance was King Abimelech when Isaac was during the famine, and Isaac had to go north into Canaan and live in the area of King Abimelech. And he was trying to pass Rebekah off as his sister, and God met with Abimelech and said, they're married. You better be careful. So this is a warning from God again, like he warned the king before. He's now warning Laban. So God gives him a strange warning. He says, don't say anything good or bad. Okay. It kind of sounds strange to you.
A little bit. Almost like don't speak to him.
Yeah. Don't say anything.
It's almost like don't raise a hand against Jacob. That's certainly implied. But don't say anything bad. Don't say anything good. But certainly kind of strange. So why does God tell Laban not to say anything good to Jacob?
Not sure.
Even more interesting, huh? God is trying to teach Jacob something. So if you start telling him something good about what he's doing, it's going to be hard for God to give him a lesson along the way. So, all right. Going on. 26 to 27.
Then Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done? You've deceived me, and you've carried off my daughters like captives in war. Why did you run off secretly and deceive me? Why didn't you tell me so I could send you away with joy and singing to the music of timbrels and harps?"
Okay. So Laban catches up. He gives Jacob a sob story of concern and hurt feelings. He says that Jacob has deceived him. It's kind of like a bad deal, isn't it? So is Laban really following what God had asked him? Doesn't sound like it. Yeah. But he's certainly saying, you didn't allow me to give a proper goodbye to my daughters, which is probably true. You didn't allow me to do it. And he's basically deceiving here. He says he knew about Jacob's departure, and he wanted to celebrate the event in songs of joy, huh? Yeah, right. So what's going on here?
He's confronting Jacob. Well, why did you?
He's confronting, but he's also trying to save face. And in this culture, saving face was very important. We saw that when Abraham was negotiating for his grave, price for his grave. There was a bargaining that took place between Abraham and the townspeople, the owner of the site, and they were trying to joust with each other, basically, try to outdo each other and save face and that kind of stuff. And this is basically what's happening here. It's just part of the culture. All right, 28 and 29, Johnny.
Did you want to start and stop the recording?
Yeah, good point. Let me do that real quick if I can, and we'll start back. Where was I?
28.
28. Did we read it?
No.
28, 29.
Yeah, Joni.
You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. You've done a foolish thing. I have the power to harm you. But last night the God of your father said to me, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad."
So I'm not sure he's saying not doing what God had asked him. He's doing both good and bad here, right? He's trying to be nice, but he's bartering. So Laban's declaring, I have the power to do harm to you, which is probably his original intent. And notice in verse 20, he talks about the God of your father. And who's Jacob's father? Isaac. So it's Isaac's God. So Jacob knows that Rebekah married Isaac. So Laban certainly hears from God and knows God's power, and he's trying to obey God, but he's not doing a very good job of it. But he doesn't have a personal relationship with God, so he's certainly struggling with that, right? He is an unbeliever. And here we see God acting according to his word through a covenant with Jacob to protect Jacob. And when back in Genesis 28:15, it says, "I am with you and watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised." So here in verse 29, We see God at work because Laban can't harm him anyway. God's going to protect him. All right. So nevertheless, Jacob has deceived Laban, and his wife has stolen from Laban. So what's God going to do to deal justly with mistakes that both Jacob and Rebekah have made? Is he going to do anything?
Permission?
Probably at some point in time he is, right?
Some fashion.
Both of them. And in Rebecca's case, she's not going to live much longer. Or Rachel's. I get Rebecca and Rachel. Rachel's case. All right, verse 30, Johnny.
Now you have gone off because you long to return to your father's household. But why did you steal my gods?
Okay. You stole my gods. So now Laban is accusing Jacob of stealing his gods. So even in the haste of picking up his supplies and all the necessities to catch up with Jacob, Laban has noticed that his idols are missing. And as I said earlier, they're probably in a prominent place in the house. Probably easy for him to notice that. So in this day and time, this is a high crime and misdemeanor, something to be impeached of. And Jacob's response is exactly what you would expect from someone in his situation. We see that next.
Jacob answered Laban, I was afraid because I thought you would take your daughters away from me by force. But if you find anyone who has your gods, that person shall not live. In the presence of our relatives, see for yourself whether there is anything of yours here with me. And if so, take it. Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the gods.
Okay. So Jacob gives a truthful response. He didn't know Rachel had taken it. Who asked Jacob to leave and return home?
God.
God did.
God.
Yeah. So Jacob certainly has rights to do what he did, right? But did he do it in the right way?
No.
No, he didn't do it.
No.
So is Jacob a Democrat or a Republican?
Oh.
He's a sinner.
He's a sinner.
He's a Democrat then.
Oh.
So from Jacob's perspective, since God told me to do something, I am free to do whatever is necessary to bring this about. Is that a Democrat or Republican?
Democrat.
Stop it.
The ends justifies the means.
Democrat.
Democrat. It's not a faith-based walk, right? So instead, he should have done the right thing, which is step up the situation, tell Laban he's leaving, tell him that God has told him to do so, and it's now time. He didn't do that. So Jacob's response is really response to Laban's second accusation. And so he's responding forcefully and basically declaring his innocence and offering Jacob, or offering to allow Laban to conduct a search and identify if the idols aren't there. And he's basically saying, if you find on anybody's possessions here, they shall not live. That's pretty severe punishment, but that's typically what they did. So Laban searches account. 33 to 34.
So Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the tent of the two female servants, but he found nothing. After he came out of Leah's tent, he entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them inside her camel's saddle and was sitting on them. Laban searched through everything in the tent but found nothing.
Okay. So he searched everywhere. He went into Rachel's tent, didn't find anything. Um, and we know that she's taking the goods, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Kind of surprised he was searching her tent. He probably searched other areas as well, I assume.
I think he searched everywhere.
Yeah.
He wants his idols back.
Yeah.
Verse 35.
Rachel said to her father, "Don't be angry, my lord, that I cannot stand up in your presence. I'm having my period." So he searched but could not find the household gods.
All right. So she has a period. Normally, the normal situation is for females, if a man comes in, she's obligated to stand and to bow in his presence. That was the normal things. But if a woman has a period, they're not obligated to do that. They don't have the cleanliness that we have today. So that was a normal practice. So she's probably sitting on her saddlebag that she had for her camel, and that's where she probably stored the idols, and therefore he didn't have the opportunity to search. Right? All right, next verse, Johnny.
Jacob was angry and took Laban to task. "What is my crime?" he asked Laban. "How have I wronged you that you hunt me down? Now that you have searched through all my goods, what have you found that belongs in your household? Put in here in front of your relatives and mine, and let them judge between the two of us."
Okay. So David's kind of passionate here, right? He's really got something to be angry about because he's been basically declared innocent because Laban couldn't find anything. He searched through the entire camp and come back empty.
Jacob didn't know anyway.
He didn't know anyway. Exactly. 38 through 41, Johnny.
"I have been with you for 20 years now. Your sheep and goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten rams from your flocks. I did not bring you animals torn by wild beasts. I bore the loss myself. And you demanded payment from me for whatever was stolen by night or by day or night. This was my situation. The heat consumed me in the daytime and the cold at night, and sleep fled from my eyes. It was like this for the 20 years I was in your household. I worked for you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 for your flocks. 6 years for your flocks, and you changed my wages 10 times.
Okay. So pretty passionate, right? And he's basically recounting all he's done with Laban, and he's been faithful in his service, and he's done a good job, and he's proud of it, even though Laban is not treating him well. And he reminds him of his changing his wages 10 times. 42, Johnny.
If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been with me, you would surely have sent me away empty-handed. But God had seen my hardship and the toil of my hands, and last night he rebuked you."
Okay. So the God of Abraham and Isaac has also been with Jacob. He's acknowledging that, which is good. And he's saying that God has also entered judgment against Laban. He's aware of that because Laban just told him that. And the dream that Laban had with God. And Jacob is basically interpreting this dream, saying, hey, God is putting judgment on you. And but he's making a mistake here in understanding why God has done this. So we need to kind of maybe explore that a bit. Certainly God is passing judgment against Laban, but for a different reason than Jacob is doing. Is God favoring Jacob because Jacob is a man who does the right things? No, we know he's not doing that. Has God chosen to leave Laban at a disadvantage because he is a dishonest man?
Probably not.
Probably not. He's doing it because he cursed, basically cursed Jacob. All right.
So God's upholding the promise he gave.
Yeah.
His word.
So if God is going to reward the person in the right, it would be Laban who receives the reward, because Jacob and Rachel have been receiving the rebuke because they did the wrong thing. Jacob left without telling Laban. Rachel stole the goods, etc. So really, the basis of God protecting Jacob is really grace, because Jacob hadn't earned anything. And the promise made, that was a promise he made before he left Canaan to get a wife. So he's going against Laban because Laban didn't do Jacob right, because he cursed Jacob. If you look at the nation of Israel, can you ask the same thing? What they've done? Jacob is all about works. So if you look at the nation of Israel and the beliefs that they had about God, they believed in works or God's atonement. They believed in the law, God's law, which came from Moses, above grace. They were more interested in the external than they were the internal affairs of what God wanted to do. And they considered appearance more important than reality. And that's kind of what Jacob is doing here as well. So God is really taking the step of appearing to Jacob in the next chapter. He's going to appear to Jacob in the physical form, and he's going to help him try to learn some of these lessons that needs to go forward. We'll see that as we get in the next chapter. All right, Joni, verses 43 through 44.
Laban answered Jacob, "The women are my daughters, the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks. All you see is mine. Yet what can I do today about these daughters of mine, or about the children they have borne? Come now, let's make a covenant, you and I, and let it serve as a witness between us."
Okay. So this is probably a good place to stop. We'll finish up the rest of the chapter next week. But they've gone through their arguing points and accused each other of things. And now Laban has taken the initiative to ask for a covenant. So next week we'll talk about what the covenant is all about and what that leads to, and then we'll go into the next chapter.